I remember thinking, this is it. This is really happening. The dress fit like it was made for my bones, not just my body. The boutique smelled like roses and champagne, and everyone kept calling me glowing. I felt light, floating, until my phone buzzed in the dressing room. I almost didn't look. I was mid-laugh, twisting in front of the mirror, when I caught the screen light up. No name, just an unknown number. Curiosity made me swipe, and that's when the world shifted. Pictures. Messages, dates, screenshots I hadn't asked for, but couldn't unsee. It was him. And her. Over and over again. Months of betrayal, laid out like a slideshow from hell. At first, my breath caught in my chest. You know that feeling? Like your lungs forget how to work? That was me. 1 second, I was a bride. The next, just a woman holding a phone full of lies. The seamstress asked if I was okay. I nodded. Too calm, too still. My friends saw the change in my face and started panicking, begging me to cancel everything. But I just stared at the phone, lips barely moving, and whispered, "No, we're still getting married." Their voices blurred, everyone talking at once. "Are you sure? We can call it off. You don't have to do this." But I wasn't really hearing them. All I could hear was the echo of my own heartbeat, steady and sharp, like a countdown. I wasn't the woman he thought I was. Not anymore. He expected tears. He expected a scene. He was going to get a performance, just not the one he imagined. I stood tall, adjusted my veil, and smiled at my reflection like nothing had changed. But everything had. That girl who used to dream about this day, she died somewhere between screenshot number 3 and number 4. What was left was someone colder, smarter, someone who knew exactly what to do next, because canceling the wedding would have been too easy, and honestly, too kind. I went through the motions, tasting cakes, confirming flower deliveries, smiling for the last-minute photos. No one suspected a thing. I'd trained my face to hold a perfect lie. Meanwhile, every second was sharpening my focus. I wasn't walking away. I was walking him straight into the trap he'd set himself. The aisle wasn't just a path, it was my stage. That night, alone in my apartment, I sat with the dress draped across my bed. I ran my fingers along the lace and thought about vows. What they meant, what they were supposed to mean. And then I whispered to the empty room, "I'll walk down that aisle and walk him straight into hell after." I didn't sleep that night. I just lay there, eyes open, watching the ceiling like it might offer answers. But deep down, I already knew exactly what to do. Rage is loud, but revenge is quiet, cold, calculated. I wasn't about to ruin his life in a moment of fury. No, I'd savor every step, every smile. By morning, I was back in bride mode, laughing with my mom, clinking coffee cups with my maid of honor, posting the usual last day single selfie. I made it all look so easy. And maybe that's what scared me most, how easy it was to pretend. But beneath every laugh was a plan. Beneath every smile, a storm. The wedding wasn't off, it was only just beginning. I thought about the irony, how he had no clue what I now carried in my heart. He believed he'd fooled me, dodged the bullet, won the game. But I wasn't the prize anymore. I was the reckoning. And he was about to become the groom who got everything he wanted, and then lost it all, one piece at a time. At the altar, I'd look into his eyes and lie just like he did. You know what they say, for better or for worse. But no one ever talks about for revenge. And me? I planned to honor my vows, in my own way. The morning of the wedding was picture perfect. Sunlight streaming in, champagne glasses clinking, everyone fussing over me like I was royalty. And in a way, I was. Just not the kind they thought. I slipped into my gown like armor, my makeup flawless, smile practiced. They called me the happiest bride they'd ever seen. If only they knew. I wasn't walking into a marriage. I was walking into battle. The ceremony was straight out of a fairy tale. Music, flowers, teary guests. And there he was, waiting at the altar, eyes shining, thinking he'd won. I took his hand, and I didn't flinch. I kissed him, and I didn't tremble. I said, "I do," like I meant it. And every time he looked at me like I was the love of his life, I smiled. Because soon, he'd understand what real heartbreak feels like. He had no idea I knew. That I'd seen it all: the hotel rooms, the flirtations, the tangled sheets with someone who wasn't me. But I didn't show it. That was the power. While he celebrated, I calculated. And standing there in front of everyone, promising to love, honor, and cherish, I made a vow of my own, to take everything he built and make him watch it collapse. The crowd cheered, the rings were exchanged, and as we walked back down the aisle hand in hand, I felt like I was leading a man straight into his own undoing. He thought it was the start of our forever, but it was only the first scene of my script. The one where the villain gets the girl, just before she sets fire to everything he holds dear. The reception was a dream, or at least, that's what everyone said. The music was perfect, the food divine, the toasts just emotional enough to draw tears. I danced, laughed, and held his hand like he was my whole world. And all the while, he beamed like a man who got away with murder. But I wasn't just smiling, I was studying. Every person, every detail, every weak spot. I started planting seeds, quietly and precisely. When we signed the final set of papers, the ones he thought were just ceremonial, I slid in a prenuptial agreement so tight it could strangle him if he ever tried to pull anything stupid again. And he signed it, blindly. Drunk on ego, tipsy on champagne, fully convinced he'd won the lottery. I didn't need to scream. I had ink on paper. I sweet-talked his co-workers, casually asking about those long work trips while sipping my wine. A few were all too eager to share. Turns out guilt makes people sloppy, and gossip flows freely when you pose as the adoring wife. Every little story? I saved it. Voice memos, notes, dates, even receipts from the wedding. I kept them all, because every detail, no matter how small, could be used later. By the time we cut the cake, I already had 3 more pieces of evidence than I had walking down the aisle, and when he fed me that first bite and kissed my cheek, he whispered, "Forever, baby." I smiled again, soft and sweet, and whispered back, "Yes, forever." And deep down, I meant it, just not the way he thought. I made sure to thank every guest personally. A hug here, a kind word there, all while scanning for clues. One cousin mentioned how the office Christmas party got wild, and I smiled, asked for photos. Another friend let slip that my new husband had a thing for late nights at the Marriott. I laughed politely, even made a joke about how dedicated he was to his job. Inside, I was archiving every word. No one suspected a thing. I was radiant, affectionate, the very definition of a new bride in love. Meanwhile, I was carefully stacking ammunition behind every compliment. He watched me from across the room like he was the luckiest man alive. And maybe he was, right before the fall. Because while he was basking in the glow of a perfect day, I was sharpening the shadows underneath it. I didn't just want to destroy him. I wanted him to realize he handed me every tool to do it, willingly, naively, with a smile on his face and my lipstick still on his cheek. He'd thrown away my trust so casually, like I'd never notice. So now I'd build something else in its place, a silent machine of consequences that he wouldn't even see coming. By the end of the night, we drove off with cans on the bumper, laughter in the air, and confetti still in my hair. To him, it was a celebration. To me, it was a beginning, not of marriage, but of the unraveling. And as I rested my head on his shoulder in the back of that car, one thought rang louder than the cheers behind us. He just married his biggest mistake. Being the perfect wife was easier than I expected. I made coffee before he woke up. I kissed him goodbye at the door. I even texted little heart emojis during the day. He bragged about me to his friends. "Camila's amazing. I really hit the jackpot." And I smiled. Because every compliment was a stitch in the mask I wore. He thought he married a dream. He had no idea he was living in a trap. Behind the scenes, I was working, digging, tracking. I created a spreadsheet. Yes, a spreadsheet with dates, names, hotel bookings, everything. I cross-referenced his company expenses with his location history. I found patterns. And receipts. So many receipts. the kind that don't lie, even when people do. It became almost surgical, watching his mess become my evidence. Then came the loan. A joint application I never signed, but somehow my name was on it. That was the crack in the foundation I'd been waiting for. Legal fraud, on paper, tangible. He forged my signature to get a better interest rate. And the best part? I didn't even confront him. Not yet. I smiled when he told me we'd build a future together. I nodded like a good little wife. But inside, I filed it away like a loaded gun. It would have been easy to explode, to rage, to demand answers, but that's not how you win. No, I let him keep going, let him get comfortable. The more he believed I was clueless, the more reckless he became. And every lie he told was another thread I could pull, slowly, gently, until everything unraveled. I started backing up everything: emails, bank statements, screenshots. I bought a separate drive and labeled it with something sweet and innocent: wedding memories. He never questioned it. Why would he? He thought he was in control, but every time he kissed me goodbye, I archived another reason he'd regret ever meeting me. Every whisper, every lie, became a breadcrumb leading straight to his downfall. I reached out to a lawyer, a friend of my cousin's, discreet and sharp. She didn't even flinch when I laid it all out. "He thinks you're playing house," she said, "but you're building a case." She helped me draw lines between his personal betrayals and professional misconduct. We weren't just dealing with a cheating husband, we were dealing with a man stupid enough to leave a trail wide open and arrogant enough to think no one would follow it. Some nights I'd sit across from him at dinner, watching him scroll through his phone while telling me about his tiring day. He had no clue I knew who he was texting. He didn't notice the way I watched his eyes, tracked his patterns. I wasn't angry anymore. That fire had cooled into something sharper. I didn't want to scream. I wanted to make sure he heard the silence when it all came crashing down. And maybe that's what kept me going. Not just the betrayal, but the satisfaction of knowing he was writing his own ending with every lie. All I had to do was stay quiet and let him hang himself with the rope he kept handing me. The more I stayed sweet, the more careless he became. One night he even left his work laptop open. I didn't snoop. I waited, patiently. The next morning, while he showered, I took photos of files with dates that lined up too well with his business trips. I wasn't looking for a smoking gun anymore. I had an arsenal. And still, I made pancakes. Still, I kissed his forehead like nothing had changed. I memorized his schedule down to the hour. I knew when he'd be at the gym, when he'd be working late, when he'd be too distracted to notice I'd left the apartment with a flash drive in my purse. I was methodical. I was silent. And above all, I was underestimated, which made everything that much easier. He thought I was obsessed with him. In reality, I was obsessed with the exit. But there were moments, little flickers, where I almost felt something like grief. Not for him, but for the version of me that once believed him. The girl who looked at him like he hung the stars. She didn't survive the screenshots. And some nights, when I looked in the mirror, I barely recognized the woman staring back. She was colder. Smarter. But still, somehow, heartbreakingly calm. The day I realized I didn't need closure was the day I knew I'd already won. He was still lying, still building a fantasy he thought I was too blind to question. But the game was already over. He just didn't know he'd already lost. Not yet. Our 3-month anniversary felt like the perfect time. Not because I wanted to celebrate, but because he would never see it coming. I cooked his favorite meal. Set the table with candles, music, the whole romantic fantasy. He walked through the door with a smile, kissed my cheek, and said, "You're perfect." And for the first time, I smiled back and meant it, just not for the reasons he thought. Dinner was calm. He talked about work. I asked about his goals. We clinked glasses like a couple who had no secrets. I watched him chew, unaware of what I was about to serve next. When dessert came, it wasn't cake. It was a gift, wrapped in silver paper, tied with a silk ribbon. "For you," I said, placing it gently in his hands. "Something to remember this by." He unwrapped it slowly, like a child on Christmas morning, and then paused. "A scrapbook?" He laughed. You're too cute. He opened it. Page 1, a photo of us on our engagement night. Page 2, a screenshot of his first lie. Page 3, a hotel receipt under his company name. His smile faltered. I didn't say a word. I just watched the color drain from his face as he turned each page like flipping through his own autopsy. Every photo, every document, every timeline, all right there in ink and proof. This isn't real, he muttered. This isn't... But it was. And I waited until he looked up, eyes wide with panic, before I finally spoke. Calm, steady. That's the story you wrote. I just illustrated it. He started shaking, first his hands, then his voice. Camilla, please let me explain. I tilted my head, curious. Which part? I asked. The cheating? The loan fraud? Or the part where you used my name to pay for your double life? He opened his mouth, but nothing came out. Just silence. Heavy, pathetic silence. For the first time, I watched him realize I wasn't the fool. He was. I slid a folder across the table. Inside, paperwork, legal documents, bank statements, emails, a letter from my attorney, another from his employer. I froze the accounts yesterday, I told him, voice calm, deliberate. The house is in my name, the car too. You'll get a call in the morning. Your promotion's been rescinded. Turns out HR doesn't love workplace affairs. That one landed like a brick. He looked sick. I didn't need to raise my voice. The evidence screamed louder than I ever could. You played me, I said softly, but I built the board. He begged, cried, tried to crawl out from under the weight of what he'd done. But I didn't flinch. Every apology felt like sandpaper against glass. Too little. Too late. He didn't love me. He loved what I gave him. Safety, image, control. And now, he had none. He fell to his knees beside the table. I made a mistake. Please, don't throw this away. I looked down at him, feeling absolutely nothing. You threw it away the first time you lied to me, I whispered. Everything since then was just me catching up. He followed me as I walked toward the bedroom, still pleading, still bargaining. We can fix this, he kept saying. You don't mean this. But he didn't understand. I'd meant every word, every moment, since the day I said, I do. I pulled out his packed suitcase, already zipped, already waiting. You're not staying here tonight, I said, handing it to him. You lost that privilege the second you made me your alibi. He stood there like a ghost, holding the life he thought was secure in a suitcase he didn't pack. Camilla, please. I didn't answer. I just walked to the door, opened it, and waited. He lingered, still hoping, still spinning lies. But there was nothing left for him here. The man I once loved had been replaced, not by a stranger, but by a coward, and I had no room for cowards in my future. He stepped outside without another word. And when the door clicked shut behind him, I felt it, the weight lift, not just from my chest, but from my soul. I didn't cry, I didn't crumble. I stood in the silence of my reclaimed space and exhaled like I hadn't in months. I was alone, yes, but I wasn't broken. I was finally free. And freedom? It felt like peace dipped in fire. I walked back into the dining room, picked up the scrapbook, and placed it gently on the shelf. Not as a keepsake, but as a warning. A reminder of the night I ended a lie, with nothing but truth and timing. He vowed to love me forever. I vowed to bury him legally. And I did. Months passed, and with everyone, I felt lighter. Court dates, paperwork, endless emails, all part of the cleanup after the storm. But I showed up to each one in full control, dressed sharp, voice steady. He showed up looking smaller each time, like a balloon losing air. The lies had eaten him alive from the inside. And now, all that charm and bravado? Gone. Just a man picking up pieces of a life he shattered. The divorce finalized on a Wednesday. I remember because it was raining, soft, steady, cleansing. I sat in my lawyer's office signing the last page, and when she slid it back to me, she said, "You did this with grace most people only dream of." I smiled, and for the first time in a long time, it wasn't forced. It wasn't a mask. It was mine. Pure, quiet satisfaction. I kept the ring. Not as a memento, but as raw material. I had it melted down, reshaped into a delicate pendant. Something small, something strong. A symbol, not of pain, but of power. People asked me why I didn't sell it. Because I paid for it, I'd say. In more ways than one. Wearing it now feels like closure against my skin. Not a reminder of him, a reminder of me. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was rising, stronger, smarter, sharper, and not in spite of what he did, but because of it. He gave me the fire, I built the forge, and soon the world would hear exactly how. I'd stayed quiet for months, not out of fear, but out of focus. Every move I made had been calculated. But now I wanted the truth to echo. So I sat down one night, turned on my camera, and told the story. Start to finish. No tears, no drama, just facts, laid out like a roadmap through betrayal. I titled the video, Why I Married a Cheater, and made him regret it. I hit upload. And went to bed. By morning, it had exploded. Thousands of views, then hundreds of thousands. Women from all over sent messages, some heartbroken, others inspired. They called me brave, called me brilliant, but I didn't feel like either. I just felt seen. Like the version of me who once doubted her gut was finally vindicated. Like I'd taken the narrative back from his hands and written it in my own ink. And as for him, he was drowning in the fallout, unemployed, socially iced out. The mistress? Gone. She left once she realized the dream life he promised was built on debt, lies, and bad credit. Friends disappeared, his reputation shredded, and not by scandal, but by silence. I didn't have to destroy him. I just had to step out of the way and let the truth do what truth always does. Rise. Funny, isn't it? He spent so long pretending to be a man worth keeping, but the moment he lost control of the lie, there was nothing left underneath. No depth, no spine. Just a hollow shell of someone who never thought the woman he betrayed would become the woman who exposed him. I decided to keep the dress, not in a box, not for nostalgia, but for something else entirely. I took it to a designer and said, "Make something new." She raised an eyebrow. I just smiled. A few weeks later, I picked up a reimagined version. Sleek, bold, nothing like the innocent lace I wore down the aisle. The skirt was gone, the bodice restructured. It fit me now, the real me. And I wore it for my first speaking event. Standing on that stage, lights warm on my skin, I felt untouchable. I wasn't telling a sob story. I was sharing a blueprint, a path from betrayal to power. I talked about trusting your instincts, reclaiming your voice, refusing to let someone else write your ending. The audience leaned in, not for the scandal, but for the rise. Because this wasn't about him anymore. This was about every woman who'd ever been lied to and told to stay quiet. And when the Q&A ended, a woman in the front row asked, "If you could go back, would you still marry him?" I didn't hesitate. "Yes," I said, "because without that lie, I'd never have found the truth in myself." Some gasped, others nodded. I wasn't bitter, I wasn't angry, I was done. And being done felt a lot like peace. The best revenge isn't walking away. It's walking down the aisle, smiling at the man who betrayed you, and leading him, step by step, into his own ruin. And then turning that ruin into a runway, for yourself.